Imagine spending $1 billion and 31 years of your life fighting this incredibly grueling, just endless war.
Yeah, a total grind.
Right. You sacrifice your sleep, your body, your relationships, all to defeat this relentless enemy. And then after 3 decades, you look at the data and realize that the enemy you've been fighting was, well, actually manufactured in your own basement.
It's a terrifying thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
So welcome to the deep dive. Today we have our hands on a really fascinating piece of fiction. It's a script excerpt from a project titled The Viper and the Roots of Vice.
Specifically, we're looking at scene 2.13c, which is just simply titled The Viper.
And I gotta say, it's a truly brilliant deconstruction of a trope that, let's be honest, we all know by heart at this point. The billionaire vigilante.
Oh, absolutely. You know the archetype, like the ultra-wealthy heir who moonlights as a heavily armored creature of the night, violently taking down street-level criminals to avenge some childhood trauma.
Right, it's a myth that's just deeply ingrained in our modern pop culture.
Exactly. But this specific script takes that familiar framework and asks a completely devastating question about, the nature of wealth and crime.
And it sets the tone for this deconstruction immediately. I mean, the author opens the scene with an epigraph. It's a quote from chapter 53 of the ancient Chinese text, the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah, that really sets the stage.
It really does. It reads, "This is called the drooling of swaggering thieves."
Which is it's a really specific evocative phrase, isn't it?
It is. When you hear swaggering thieves, you immediately picture someone breaking into a vault or, holding up a bank.
Right, but the Tao Te Ching was often critiquing rulers and the elite class who hoarded wealth while the farmers starved. So the author of this script is using that ancient quote to basically point a finger directly at the protagonist.
Okay, let's unpack this,
Mm-hmm.
because we really need to figure out who the actual thieves are in this story. Like, are they the muggers in the alleyways of this fictional city, or are they the people sitting in the boardrooms?
That is the core question here.
Yeah. So our mission for this deep dive is to really examine this protagonist, a man named Preston Drake III. We are going to look at his performative empathy, the dark, devastating irony of his family history, and what this fictional narrative tells us about modern real-world issues.
Issues like corporate responsibility and wealth inequality.
Exactly. And the downstream effects of lobbying.
And right out of the gate, we should probably clarify our lens here.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because as we dive into this, it's really important to state that we are unpacking the worldview of this specific fictional script. The author is clearly making a pointed, politically charged critique of things like trickle-down economics, corporate lobbying, and elite philanthropy.
Right, and our goal today isn't to take a side on those political arguments. We're simply examining how this narrative builds that specific case.
Exactly. We're looking at how it uses the superhero archetype to explore these systemic issues.
So let's look at how the story begins. The scene opens in a restaurant that, it practically screams insulation.
Oh, total bubble.
The script gives us some very specific visual cues. White tablecloths, $400 wine. And it explicitly notes the kind of place that doesn't have prices on the menu.
Right, because if you have to ask what it costs, you don't belong in the room.
Exactly.
It instantly establishes an atmosphere of just extreme, frictionless wealth.
Yeah, and sitting at one of these tables is our billionaire, Preston Drake III. He's in his 40s. The script describes him as having a chiseled jaw, perfect hair, old money smoothness.
He basically looks like he was genetically engineered to wear a bespoke suit.
He really does.
Yeah.
But then the writer adds a vital, unsettling detail to his description. It says his eyes are flat.
What's fascinating here is how much heavy lifting that specific physical direction is doing for the character.
Totally.
Because old money smoothness implies this practiced, inherited ease with the world. Like, he doesn't have to try. He just owns this reality.
Right.
But the flat eyes suggest a complete absence of internal presence. There's no emotional connection to the moment. He's physically there. He looks the part perfectly. But there is a profound emptiness behind the facade.
It's like the lights are on, the house is immaculate, but nobody actually lives there.
That's a great way to put it.
And contrasting this absolute emptiness is his dinner date, a woman named Miranda. She's in her 30s, described as gorgeous and idealistic. And she is deep, deep into a passionate monologue about her day job.
Yeah, she's really going for it.
She tells Preston, "I've been doing so much work with the Homeless Coalition. It's heartbreaking. The root causes are so systemic. housing policy, mental health infrastructure, wage stagnation.
She is literally laying out the structural drivers of poverty right across the table.
She is. And what's interesting is how Preston responds to her. Because he doesn't do the cliche thing. He doesn't play the out-of-touch, callous billionaire who sips his wine and says, well, they should just pull themselves up by their bootstraps.
Right, he doesn't dismiss her at all.
No, instead he flawlessly mirrors her language. He leans in and replies, absolutely. The intersectionality of poverty and municipal disinvestment creates a self-perpetuating cycle of marginalization.
It's just perfectly rehearsed.
Hold on, let me make sure I'm wrapping my head around this. Intersectionality of poverty and municipal disinvestment. That sounds like a sociology thesis.
It really does.
So let's break that down for a second, because we hear terms like municipal disinvestment thrown around in the news. But what does that actually mean mechanically? Like, how does a city actually disinvest?
It's a great question because understanding the mechanism is really key to understanding Preston's hypocrisy later on in the story.
Okay.
So municipal disinvestment basically happens when a city or local government systematically stops funding public services in certain areas. Imagine a city budget as a pool of water.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Disinvestment is slowly draining the water that goes toward public schools, mental health clinics, road maintenance, and affordable housing programs.
And why does the water drain?
Often it's because the tax base shrinks. If large corporations or ultra-wealthy individuals find ways to avoid paying local taxes, say, through complex corporate loopholes, or by relocating their headquarters on paper, the city literally loses the money required to keep those safety nets functioning.
Ah, I see. So when Preston talks about this self-perpetuating cycle, he's acknowledging that when you defund the clinic, people get sick, lose their jobs, end up on the street, which further hurts the local economy, which leads to even more defunding.
Precisely. He understands the mechanics of societal collapse perfectly.
Wow. And Miranda is clearly thrilled by this. She finally found a billionaire who, quote-unquote, gets it.
Yeah, she thinks she struck gold.
She says, exactly. Have you read the Brookings report on, and before she can even finish her sentence, Preston cuts her off. He says, the 2024 analysis, yes, compelling methodology, flawed sample size in the Midwest data, but the conclusions track.
It's wild.
Okay, I have to jump in here. He didn't just read the report. He read it closely enough to critique the methodology of the Midwest data sample.
He's fully briefed.
If I'm Miranda, I'm thinking I just found the most empathetic, engaged corporate leader on the planet. But the script immediately undercuts this. It gives us a stage direction. He says all the right things. Perfect cadence. No soul behind the eyes.
He has intellectualized human suffering to an astonishing degree.
He really has.
He possesses all the vocabulary of systemic reform. He knows the data, the reports, the buzzwords. But it is purely an academic exercise for him. He feels absolutely nothing.
Now, let me push back a little here. Is it inherently a bad thing that he's intellectualized it? You might be listening to this and thinking, well, at least he knows the data. A lot of CEOs don't even bother reading the reports.
That's fair.
Isn't it better that he understands the problem, even if he's not emotionally weeping into his wine glass?
Knowledge itself isn't bad, of course, but the script is making a point about the danger of knowledge divorced from material action.
Right.
For a billionaire, knowing the exact structural causes of poverty and doing nothing to change your own structural role in that poverty is arguably worse than ignorance.
That makes a lot of sense.
It moves from being an uneducated bystander to being a complicit architect. He is performing empathy.
Which makes Miranda's reaction kind of tragic, honestly. She looks at him and says, you're so informed. And she means it as high praise.
Yeah, she really believes it.
But being informed isn't the same as being invested. He literally checks his watch, tells her he tries to stay engaged, and then excuses himself, claiming he has an early meeting.
The classic early meeting excuse.
Exactly. And as he stands up, he drops $500 on the table and just walks out.
That $500 left on the table is the perfect punctuation mark to this entire interaction. Think about the stark visual contrast the writer paints here.
It's glaring.
They are casually discussing wage stagnation and the desperate, systemic roots of homelessness while drinking $400 wine. Then, Preston drops $500 more than many people make in a week just to politely lubricate his exit without a second thought.
Wow.
The extreme, almost grotesque wealth of the environment completely invalidates the academic empathy of their conversation.
Have you ever seen a company put out one of those massive PR campaigns talking about their commitment to the environment.
All the time.
They use all the right ESG buzzwords: environmental, social, and governance. They talk about sustainability and community empowerment. But then you look behind the curtain, and their actual factories are actively lobbying against emissions regulations and dumping toxic waste into a local river.
Yes, it's the corporate equivalent of what Preston is doing. And ESG frameworks are a great parallel.
Oh, really? How so?
In theory, ESG metrics are designed to make companies act responsibly. But in practice, many companies hire entire divisions just to manage the reporting of ESG.
Finding technical loopholes.
Exactly, finding loopholes to score highly on the index without making any material sacrifices to their profit margins. It becomes an exercise in compliance and public relations rather than actual structural change.
It's the ultimate slacktivism, just scaled up to a billionaire tax bracket. The words are there, the performance is flawless, but the material reality of their actions remains entirely selfish.
Yeah, he's just playing a part.
Preston is checking a conversational box. Like, yes, I acknowledge poverty exists. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go.
Right.
But where is he actually going? If he perfectly understands the systemic data, why isn't his money going towards systemic solutions? To answer that, we have to look at what he actually spends his billions on.
We really do.
Let's follow him out of that restaurant and into the night, because the second he leaves Miranda, the smooth facade completely drops.
The transition in the script is intentionally jarring. We cut straight from the quiet, insulated, soft-lit wealth of the restaurant to the chaotic, aggressive energy of the city at 2 a.m.
Total whiplash.
Yeah. Preston is screaming through the streets of Atrio City in a Lamborghini. His jaw is set. The old money smoothness is completely gone, replaced by a hyper-focused intensity.
He's in the zone.
He arrives at Drake Manor, his massive ancestral estate, and drives into an underground garage that, as the script specifically notes, keeps going down.
It's a literal descent into the underworld.
Exactly. He enters this military-grade subterranean bunker. The script describes it as insane. Black surfaces, blue lights, screens everywhere.
Sounds like a movie set.
There's a massive vehicle bay with something heavily armored sitting under a tarp. This is the inner sanctum of the vigilante. He sits down at a massive monitor and demands a status report from his AI computer system, which is named NXUS.
I love how the script characterizes NXUS right away. It describes the AI's voice as smooth but slightly weary.
Yeah, how does a supercomputer sound exhausted?
I know, right? But it works perfectly. Preston asks for the Atrio City crime activity, and NXUS starts reading the active police blotter. Armed robbery in progress, 47th and Vine. Domestic disturbance, Parkside Apartments. Drug transaction, Pier 7. Carjacking, downtown.
It's just a relentless, overwhelming wave of misery.
It really is. And notice the specific types of crimes the AI is listing.
Yeah.
An armed robbery, a domestic disturbance, a drug deal. These are the exact street-level manifestations of the systemic issues he and Miranda were just discussing over dinner. The drug transactions and the robberies are the downstream effects of the wage stagnation and municipal disinvestment he spoke about so fluently.
It's all connected. But does he apply that sociology thesis now?
Exactly. Does he call his foundation and say, hey, we need a massive injection of capital into the Parkside neighborhood to stabilize the housing crisis there?
Not at all.
No. Preston immediately barks the robbery. Prep the Viper. The Viper, we realize, is the heavily armored tank-like vehicle sitting under the tarp.
He is choosing to engage with a single isolated symptom of a massive societal disease, and his chosen tool is military-grade force.
It's wild, and this is where the script takes its sharpest turn, because NXUS, the AI, does something highly unexpected. Under the tarp, we hear the Viper's massive engine hum to life, but NXUS interrupts the routine.
Machine speaks up.
Machine says, sir, if I may. Preston tries to shut him down, but NXUS pushes forward. It says, It's just we've been doing this for 31 years now.
31 years.
31 years. That is an entire human career dedicated to nocturnal, bone-breaking vigilantism. 31 years of no sleep, millions of dollars spent on gadgets and physical trauma.
It's unsustainable.
And then NXUS delivers the data. And the data is just staggering. The AI says, I've been running the numbers. You've personally stopped 4,217 crimes, exposed 14 corrupt officials, dismantled 9 criminal organizations.
At first glance, you hear those numbers and think, wow, that is an unbelievable track record.
Yeah, it sounds like he's incredibly effective.
It sounds like the ultimate resume of a legendary crime fighter. Preston is undoubtedly, undeniably winning individual battles.
Right.
But when Preston dismissively asks the computer, your point, NXUS drops the hammer. The AI calmly states, crime in Atro City has increased 18% since you started.
Boom. Let's just sit with that statistic for a second. An 18% increase over 3 decades of relentless effort.
It's a massive failure.
Now, you might be listening to this right now thinking, wait, 4,000 crimes stopped is a massive number. How can we possibly say he failed? If he wasn't out there, wouldn't the crime rate be even higher?
That's the intuitive defense of punitive justice, right?
Exactly.
If you remove bad actors from the street, crime should go down. But the math of systemic generation doesn't work that way. Think of it like a public health crisis.
Okay.
If you have an outbreak of a waterborne illness and you build the most advanced, high-tech hospital in the world to treat the infected patients, you might successfully cure 4,200 people.
Which is great. That's a lot of lives saved.
It is. But if you never bother to fix the contaminated water supply, new people are going to keep getting sick every single day. Eventually, the rate of new infections outpaces your ability to treat them, and the overall sickness in the city increases by 18%.
That is a phenomenal way to look at it. Preston is treating the street-level desperation with body armor and surveillance drones.
Okay.
But the disease, the root causes he articulated at dinner, is left entirely untreated.
Right, he's just playing whack-a-mole.
Because the disease is untreated, the symptoms are multiplying faster than he can punch them. His tactical success rate is incredibly high, but his strategic failure is absolute.
And this raises a fascinating psychological question.
What's that?
Well, what does it say about a person who spends 31 years doing the exact same thing with an 18% negative return on investment?
Exactly. If Preston were operating as a CEO, which, he is in his day job, and he saw a division of his company losing 18% over 3 decades, despite pouring billions of dollars of R&D into it, he would restructure immediately.
Any competent leader would.
He would fire the leadership, change the strategy, pivot the entire business model. No rational business leader accepts a 3-decade negative ROI.
So why is Preston so completely blind to his own failure metrics here?
Because the vigilantism isn't actually about solving crime.
Wait, really? What is it about then?
If his genuine underlying goal were to eradicate crime and stabilize Atro City, the data proves his methodology is flawed. A rational actor would adapt.
But he doesn't adapt. This suggests that his nocturnal crusade fulfills a deep, unresolved psychological need. He is trapped in a compulsion loop.
Ah, I see.
The 4,200 crimes he stopped didn't fix the city, but perhaps for a fleeting moment each night, the physical act of imposing order through violence made him feel in control of his own internal trauma.
Have you ever stayed in a toxic job or a bad relationship just because the routine of it was familiar? The human brain has a terrifying ability to normalize dysfunction.
Oh, absolutely.
Preston is doing that, but on a macro citywide scale. He's self-medicating his trauma by beating up muggers. And the tragedy is the city is collateral damage in his therapy session.
And what makes it truly compelling is that we know he isn't blind to the metrics because he lacks intelligence. We established in the restaurant scene that he understands data methodology perfectly.
Right. He critiqued the sample size of the Midwest data.
Exactly. He actively, consciously compartmentalizes his intellect away from his actions as the Viper.
He chooses to put blinders on. But while Preston might be willfully blind to reality, his computer sure isn't. NXUS has no ego to protect.
Just cold, hard data.
Right. It has no emotional baggage clouding its judgment. And this AI is about to suggest a radically different approach to saving the city, an approach that shifts the focus from physical combat to corporate accountability.
This is a crucial turning point in the narrative. The AI, which was designed to assist in combat telemetry and surveillance, stick entirely out of its programmed lane to challenge its creator.
A bold move for an AI.
After the heavy silence following the 18% statistic, NXUS says, I'm not suggesting your efforts are counterproductive, sir, but perhaps someone with your profound resources, your intellect, your access to municipal data, and financial leverage.
It's gingerly trying to lead a very dangerous man to an obvious conclusion.
Very careful.
Preston just barks, spit it out, NXUS West. And the AI unleashes a blueprint for actual systemic salvation.
It lays it all out.
NXUS asks, as you considered identifying the root causes, funding treatment centers instead of body armor, affordable housing instead of surveillance drones, perhaps a living wage initiative through your family's 17 shell corporations.
Let's dissect that list because it is incredibly specific.
Yeah.
NXUS isn't just throwing out vague philanthropic ideas like, give more to charity.
No, it's very targeted.
It is directly, item by item, contrasting Preston's current violent methodology with highly specific structural alternatives. Treatment centers instead of body armor.
Yeah.
Affordable housing instead of surveillance drones.
The machine is doing the math.
The AI has calculated the astronomical financial cost of running this high-tech vigilantism operation and is suggesting that redirecting those exact funds towards social infrastructure would yield a statistically better outcome for the city's crime rate.
Okay, time out. I want to zero in on the most devastating part of NXUS's analysis, the mention of the 17 shell corporations, because this completely breaks the fourth wall of the billionaire myth.
It shatters it entirely.
We usually think of a billionaire's wealth as just a big Scrooge McDuck vault of passive money that they use to buy cool gadgets. But NXUS points out that Preston's wealth is actively generated by a sprawling corporate apparatus.
An active machine.
Exactly. Can we ELI5 this for a second? Explain like I'm 5. How do 17 shell corporations actually hurt a city? How does that tie back to the crime on the street?
Absolutely. Let's trace the mechanics of it. A shell corporation is essentially a fake company that exists only on paper. It doesn't make products, it just holds assets or routes money.
Okay.
Let's say Preston's main company, Drake Industries, makes $1 billion in profit in Atro City. Normally, they would owe a significant percentage of that to the city in taxes money that pays for the homeless coalitions, the schools, the mental health clinics.
Things Miranda was talking about.
Right. But instead, Drake Industries pays quote-unquote consulting fees or licensing rights to one of its own shell corporations located in a tax haven, like the Cayman Islands or Delaware.
Shifting the money around.
Suddenly, on paper, the Atro City branch looks like it made zero profit, so it pays zero local taxes. They legally hide the money.
Wow.
Now, multiply that by 17 shell companies operating over decades. They are systematically starving the municipal government of billions of dollars. The city has to cut budgets, the clinic closes, people lose their jobs, lose their homes, and desperation sets in. And desperation breeds crime.
So by using those shell corporations to maximize his own wealth, Preston's corporate footprint actively fuels the exact municipal disinvestment he complained about at dinner.
Precisely. He is both the arsonist and the firefighter.
Yeah, it is just wow.
He creates the economic conditions that drive people to the absolute margins of society, and then he puts on a billion-dollar suit of body armor to beat them to a pulp when they cross the line into illegality to survive.
That is the ultimate hypocrisy. Let's use an analogy here to really hammer home how absurd this is. It's like a farmer who decides he wants to save a few bucks, so he takes all the scarecrows out of his field and sells them.
Okay, I'm tracking.
He maximizes his short-term profit. But then, obviously, the crows come and start eating his entire crop. Instead of buying the scarecrows back, the farmer spends a fortune on a high-tech sniper rifle, stays up all night, every night, shooting individual crows, and complains to his neighbors about how terrible the crow problem is.
That is a phenomenal analogy.
Right. He created the vulnerability to maximize his yield, and now he's violently fighting the symptom of his own greed.
It captures the active mechanism of vulnerability perfectly. Preston didn't just passively inherit a broken city. His financial apparatus is the engine breaking it.
Yep.
Think about the cost of the Viper. We're talking military-grade tech, custom engineering, stealth capabilities. A single vehicle like that would cost tens of millions of dollars in R&D alone.
At least.
How many living wages could be subsidized in Atro City just by the cost of one armored car? How many mental health clinics could be fully funded for a decade by the budget he spends on his surveillance drones?
The numbers would be staggering. You redirect that capital into the community, and you don't just reduce the 18% increase in crime, you fundamentally alter the socioeconomic landscape of the entire region.
It changed the whole game.
NXUS sees this clearly. The cold, calculating machine is advocating for human-centric empathy, while the human is acting like a cold, unthinking weapon.
But this forces us to ask the ultimate question. When NXUS lays out this brilliant, mathematically sound, logical blueprint for corporate responsibility, how does Preston react? Does he see the light?
Not even close. He dismisses it instantly. He glares at the screen and says that's not how this works. And when NXUS gently asks why not, we finally reach the dark, rotting core of this entire narrative.
The real underlying issue.
This brings us to the inciting incident of his crusade. Preston justifies his entire violent existence, his 31 years of misery, in one single sentence. He tells the AI, because my parents were murdered. In an alley. By a criminal.
For Preston, the world has to remain binary. There are innocent, righteous victims like his parents, and there are evil, abstract criminals.
It's very black and white.
He needs the simplistic binary to justify his trauma and to legitimize his life's work. The criminal isn't a person. It's a monstrous entity that must be punished endlessly.
But NAX doesn't do abstract. NAX deals purely in data and historical record. And what the AI does next strips away all the abstraction. NAX pulls the ultimate receipts.
It really goes there.
The AI calmly responds, "Yes, sir," by a man named Harold Vance, who had been denied disability benefits 3 times and was experiencing untreated schizophrenia.
Instantly, the faceless monster in the alley is humanized. It gives the perpetrator a name, a medical condition, and a history of being failed by the very systems Preston was discussing at dinner.
It grounds it in reality.
It contextualizes the violence. Harold Vance wasn't a swaggering thief acting out of pure malice. He was a profoundly sick individual whose safety net had completely collapsed beneath him.
Now, let me play devil's advocate here, because if I'm listening to this, I might think, okay, Harold Vance was sick. That's tragic. But he still pulled the trigger. A billionaire's son isn't responsible for a random guy's schizophrenia.
That's a logical response.
But the AI doesn't stop there. NAX connects the final devastating data points that shatter Preston's entire worldview. NAX pauses and then says, "Your father's company had lobbied against the mental health funding bill that year. Drake Industries saved $4 million. Mr. Vance lost his medication. Your parents lost their lives. I have the receipts. Literally, they're in my database."
And there it is. The devastating loop is closed.
Mind-blowing.
If we connect this back to the opening quote from the Tao Te Ching, the meaning of the drooling of swaggering thieves becomes chillingly clear. The true thieves in Atro City weren't just the desperate people committing armed robbery on 47th and Vine.
Who were they?
The apex thieves, the swaggering thieves, were Drake Industries.
Wait. I have to push back on this because this is a massive leap in logic that the AI is making. Yeah. Drake Industries lobbied against a bill to save $4 million on their taxes. That's corporate greed, sure.
Yeah.
But you can't logically draw a straight line from a boardroom vote to a specific double murder in an alley years later, can you?
It feels like a stretch, right?
Doesn't that completely strip Harold Vance of his own agency?
It's a fair challenge, and it's the exact defense corporate entities use to shield themselves from the consequences of their lobbying. They say, we just voted on a tax measure, we didn't tell anyone to commit a crime.
Right.
But the script is forcing us to look at systemic violence, violence that is enacted not with a gun, but with a pen. Let's look at the literal chain of causality NSUS is presenting.
Okay, walk me through it.
Drake Industries hires lobbyists. They kill the funding bill. Because the bill dies, the municipal clinic loses its funding. Because the clinic loses funding, they have to cut their patient load. Harold Vance, a severe schizophrenic, is denied his disability benefits and loses access to the medication that tethers him to reality.
Oh, man. Without medication, he enters a state of severe paranoid psychosis, ends up wandering an alley, encounters the wealthy Drakes, and in his delusion becomes violent.
So while the boardroom didn't pull the trigger, they deliberately dismantled the exact guardrail that kept the trigger from being pulled.
For a saving of $4 million.
The call is literally coming from inside the house. The true architect of his parents' death was his own father's corporate greed. Preston has spent 31 years hating criminals, but his family's wealth, the very wealth that built his high-tech bunker, the wealth that bought the Lamborghini, the wealth that engineered the Viper, was preserved by the exact legislative action that created his parents' murderer.
It is a profound, almost Greek-level tragedy of moral contradiction. Think about the unimaginable psychological weight of that data being presented to you.
It's crushing.
For over 3 decades, Preston has externalized his immense trauma. He has projected all of his anger, his grief, and his desperate need for justice onto the street-level muggers of Atro City.
To accept Nexus's data means accepting that his entire life's mission has been a misdirected farce. It means acknowledging that his family's legacy is built on blood.
It means realizing that every time he punches a street thug, he's basically punching a mirror. His family created the conditions of the city he hates.
Absolutely.
You're listening to this right now, so put yourself in that underground bunker for a second. Imagine you have dedicated your entire existence to a cause. You've broken bones, lost sleep, alienated yourself from society.
Driven yourself to the brink.
Right. And then an emotionless machine hands you absolute, undeniable proof, literal receipts staring at you from a glowing blue screen, that your deepest justifications were fundamentally flawed, that your trauma was a self-inflicted wound by your own family.
What a moment.
What would you do? Would you have the incredible strength it takes to admit you were wrong, to say, my God, I've wasted my life, and then begin the agonizing work of dismantling your own empire to actually fix the damage? Or would you shut your eyes, cover your ears, and double down on the delusion?
It is arguably the most difficult thing a human being can do to voluntarily shatter the narrative that has given their life meaning, especially when that meaning is tied to profound foundational trauma.
It takes a lot of courage.
It forces a total collapse of the ego. If Preston accepts the AI's premise, he can no longer be the righteous savior of Atro City. He must recognize himself as the heir to the corruption that destroyed his own life. The cognitive dissonance is just staggering.
Yeah, the tension in that room must be unbelievable.
And this brings us to the agonizing climax of the scene. Faced with undeniable proof of his family's culpability, what does Preston Drake III choose?
The script notes a long pause. The silence in that high-tech bunker must be absolutely deafening. The truth is just hanging in the air. The cure for the city is right in front of him.
It's handed to him on a silver platter.
All he has to do is say, you're right. NXUS, shut it down. Liquidate the shell companies. Fund the clinics. Let's start over.
But he doesn't.
But instead, he stares at the screen and he gives his final chilling command. He just says, prep the Viper.
It is a devastating moment. He makes an active, conscious choice to remain in his delusion. He rejects the truth because the truth requires accountability and systemic change.
Right, which is hard.
He prefers the brutal, familiar simplicity of punching a symptom to the complex, unglamorous work of dismantling a corrupt system, especially when he sits at the very top of that system.
It's so much easier to go beat up a guy at Pier 7 than it is to dissolve 17 shell companies, pay billions in back taxes, and face the ghosts of his father's greed.
Precisely. And we can relate this back to the broader societal themes of this deep dive. How often do institutions, governments, and even individuals choose the comfort of the status quo over the difficult work of systemic reform?
All the time.
Even when that status quo is demonstrably failing, even when we are staring right at an 18% increase in the damage, the allure of the familiar, even a violent and failing familiar, is incredibly strong. It protects the ego and preserves existing power structures.
It really is.
Yeah.
We'd rather manage the decay than undergo the surgery required to cure it. The image that really sticks with me at the very end of this script is the contrast between the two characters in that room.
The man and the machine.
You have the human, Preston, with his flat eyes, completely shut down, refusing to process reality, choosing the path of endless violence.
Yeah.
And then you have the machine. The final line of the scene is NXUS, the artificial intelligence, responding to the command. The script says, sighing, "The Viper is prepped, sir."
The machine size. A program written in code exhibits more humanity, more emotional exhaustion, and more moral fatigue than the man who is supposedly the city's heroic savior.
It's so ironic.
The AI understands the tragic futility of the cycle they are about to repeat for the 4,218th time, but it is bound by its programming to obey. Preston is bound by nothing but his own ego, his own wealth, and his own refusal to grow, yet he acts like he is the one without a choice.
What an incredible journey this single scene takes us on. We started in a quiet, upscale restaurant with a wealthy man performing empathy over $400 wine, dropping sociology buzzwords about municipal disinvestment.
Then we followed him down into the dark.
We followed him down into his high-tech, military-grade bunker of endless feudal warfare, and we uncovered the devastating truth that his family's own corporate greed manufactured his tragic origin story.
The very villain he has spent his life fighting was created by a $4 million line item on his father's tax ledger.
It is a brilliant, sharp critique. It reminds us that this isn't just a deconstruction of comic book vigilantism.
No, it's much bigger than that.
It is an incisive commentary on how extreme wealth can isolate individuals from the consequences of their actions. It shows how corporate lobbying, tax evasion, and boardroom decisions have real, deadly downstream effects on public health, safety, and individual lives.
The distance between a corporate lobbying firm and a dark, violent alley is much, much shorter than we like to think.
The consequences never stay in the boardroom. They always bleed out into the streets. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder on your own.
Something to take away.
We've seen how Preston's vigilantism is essentially just a violent coping mechanism, a way to treat the visible wounds of a society his own family's wealth helped tear apart. He is subsidizing the symptoms while ignoring the disease.
Right.
So look around at the real world today. Look at the massive, highly publicized philanthropic initiatives launched by the ultra-wealthy. How many of those initiatives are, in essence, just billionaires prepping the Viper?
It's a great question.
The next time you see a massive corporate charity announcement or a billionaire funding a high-profile initiative to fight a societal ill, look past the PR. Look at their supply chains, their lobbying records, their tax structures.
Follow the money.
Ask yourself, are they genuinely willing to dismantle the systems that caused the problem? Are they funding the cure? Or are they just building a more expensive high-tech bucket to catch the water from a pipe they refuse to fix?
Because until we address the drooling of the swaggering thieves at the top,
We will be fighting in the dark forever.